right, let's take one last look at your traffic and weather for your ride in on this Wednesday morning. Got several accidents to report. Got one at Cashman and Two Notch, another one at Harbison and Broad River, I-26 eastbound at Airport Boulevard, another one at Two Notch and South Lake, and finally one at Leesburg and Garner's Ferry. Today, a little bit warmer than it has been, a high of 50 with plenty of sunshine. Tomorrow, back down to 47 with a mix of clouds. Currently 30 degrees here in downtown Columbia. That is your traffic and weather here on the early game. Oh, 9 o'clock on your Wednesday morning. Welcome in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head back in studio with Jack Veltri after his snow adventures up in Charlotte and in the upstate. Welcome back.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Yeah. Bravely made my way back to Columbia this morning.
You drove in this morning?
Yeah. I just got in probably.
What time did you leave?
15 minutes ago. I left probably a little bit before 7:30. So it's about an hour 20, give or take, to get here. A little bit of traffic getting into Columbia, but yeah, I got up early. I'm tired, but you know what? I'm here, ready to roll, have a good show, and we got a lot to talk about today.
And you're still not a caffeine guy, right?
No, I've just had a little bit of water this morning.
That's insane to me. I don't know how you function without caffeine. I'm not as crazy as Elijah, but I need some balance of caffeine to get me through most days.
No, I understand that for sure. But, I know I'm not the only person that doesn't drink caffeine. But, yeah, it's good to be back, man, and a lot to talk about as usual.
Were you going to transition us into our Sandstorm Pick-Me-Up? You have one for today?
We got a basketball game tonight.
We do, and you know what? If you want to stay up for it, you're probably going to need some caffeine, because guess what? It's going to be a late tip, which we'll talk about right after the Sandstorm Pick-Me-Up. And you know what would help if I turned on the right key for it?
Time to get hyped. Here's your 9 a.m. Sandstorm, sponsored by George Sink Injury Lawyers. Just call all nines.
It is time for your 9 a.m. Sandstorm Pick-Me-Up, brought to you by South Carolina's largest injury law firm, George Sink Injury Lawyers. If you've been hurt in the car or at work, call George Sink now at 803-ALL-9s. Yes, indeed, tonight, South Carolina welcomes in the defending national champion Florida Gators over at Colonial Life Arena. Tip-off at 9 o'clock. Pre-game coverage starting at 8:30 with Derek and Judge Manning here on 107.5 The Game. And as we say every single time, you need to win. Obviously, this would be a huge win because you're beating one of the best teams in the SEC and the defending national champions. But like all these other games, you got to find out some way to win it. I don't know if they can, but you need to.
This one's going to be tough because Florida's an interesting team. They have been playing pretty well lately. I've lost a few games to some pretty good teams in the non-conference slate. Losses to Arizona, Duke, UConn, really good teams, some of the best in the country, arguably. And then SEC play, they lost to Missouri, lost to Auburn most recently. So this is a team that is definitely beatable. And look, they were beatable last year when South Carolina took them down to the wire. The problem in that game was South Carolina led most of the way, and then once Florida started running the full court press, the Gamecocks had no answers. Now, with this Florida team, and I noticed in a lot of their losses, which this isn't really a surprise because when you lose, typically you don't shoot as well. But in Florida's case, they haven't been a good three-point shooting team really at all this season. They are ranked way down in the country, 348th overall at just 28.5% from beyond the arc. The thing about them, though, is while they cannot shoot to save their life from three-point range, which may benefit South Carolina in this game if they can force some misses, is just the rebounding that Florida does. Florida is better than any team in the country when it comes to getting boards. I mean, they average more than 46 boards a game. So that's going to be really tough on the Gamecocks, especially when you look at the offensive rebounding in this game. That would create a lot of second-chance opportunities for Florida. And so, look, South Carolina is going to have to make a lot of shots, but they're also going to have to defend really well and make sure they're not giving extra opportunities in this game, because that's where Florida can really hurt you.
Yeah, I'm looking at the lineup here, and they are going to have a size advantage over South Carolina just in terms of what they put out on the court, primarily with their starting five. In fact, in D1, they have an average height of 13th overall, so going to be a really tall team that obviously helps them when it comes to those rebounds and obviously winning in the paint. Again, that's where South Carolina struggled so much this year, their defense in the paint, getting the rebounds and all that kind of stuff, and this is a team in Florida. It's going to come in here and do those things really, really well. Again, like you mentioned, they're not going to be like A&M, and they're not going to shoot the lights out from three and make 17 of them like the Aggies did the other day, but physically they're going to try and dominate you inside the arc, and we've seen South Carolina struggle with that a lot this year. So this could be an ugly game if South Carolina doesn't bring its best to the court. You can still lose by bringing your best to the court, but you hope at the very least you make it competitive.
One good thing for tonight, one little note, is that Eli Ellis should be available to play tonight.
Okay.
He was not listed on the SEC availability report last night. In fact, South Carolina has all available players set for this game. So besides the red shirters who have always been out this year, they should have everyone else available to play in this game, which would include Eli Ellis. So we'll see what his availability looks like tonight when he takes the floor. But that's some good news for South Carolina, since he hasn't played since, I believe, the Arkansas game. So it's been about 2 weeks now, and you're really hoping he can provide you a little bit of a spark, especially from a shooting standpoint. Because you're right, Tyler. Like you have a disadvantage with size. You're not going to. Here's the thing. I don't think you're going to win the rebound battle tonight. I'll be shocked if South Carolina does win the rebound battle. The thing you got to hope for in this game is that you keep it close. Like, it's not Florida pulling in 45 rebounds and South Carolina pulling in, 25 to 30. You kind of want to cut the gap a little bit to where maybe it's only a 5 to 10 rebound difference, and I think that will definitely keep you in the game. But you also have to shoot well, and having a guy like Eli back, he's had some inconsistencies this year. Again, dealing with injuries as well, that has probably hampered his play for sure. But you're hoping now that he's back, hopefully really healthy too, he can go out here, provide you a little bit of spark coming off the bench.
Well, and one of the keys that we talk about every single time South Carolina plays is, can you get yourself to the free throw line? Again, South Carolina, one of the best free throw shooting teams in the country. Coincidentally, on the other side, Florida, one of the worst, 255, 55th in KenPom when it comes to their free throw percentage. So can you get to the line tonight, and can you make those baskets? That could end up being the difference if you do make this a really tight game.
No, it definitely could, and it's going to be a challenge facing this front court that Florida has. It's really good. I mean, Thomas Howell's really good, and then you have Condon as well. So this could be a challenge for South Carolina tonight, but I think, again, I don't expect them to win the rebound battle, but from a shooting standpoint and limiting those second chance opportunities, I think that is where South Carolina may be at an advantage, even though South Carolina in its own right has not been particularly amazing shooting the ball this season. But at times when they get hot from three-point range, they can be tough to beat, and that may be where South Carolina hopefully is able to gain a little bit of the upper hand.
And last year, this was a Florida team that you gave one of their biggest scares en route to winning their national championship. When they came in here, as you mentioned earlier, they were down double digits about halfway through the second half. Unfortunately, they ended up breaking your hearts by tying the game and then having the winning two-pointer there in the final minute. But you made it competitive. You held them under what their season average was in total points scored. So you made a game out of it, I'm sure. For the guys that are returning on the team this year, certainly for Todd Golden, their head coach, that's going to be in the back of their mind of how difficult you did make it on them last time they came in here.
Yeah, no, it definitely was a game that there are a lot of games that South Carolina should have won last year,
including to the two teams that made the Final Four.
This is the one against Florida last year that I think is the one that's like, you look back at it, it's like, how the heck did South Carolina lose that game? Because they were up by I believe, double digits.
I think it was 13, right?
Yeah, it was like 13 with like 9 minutes left to go in the game. They blow the lead. I mean, Florida ran the press, and that changed the entire momentum of the game. I still don't understand how South Carolina didn't have an adjustment or something in place to kind of counteract that and better handle that pressure. But for the last 8.5 minutes of that game, South Carolina had no answers. That allowed Florida to get back into the game. So, and look, if that is the situation tonight, hopefully South Carolina learned their lesson and is much better prepared for it. Hopefully it doesn't have to come down to a point where South Carolina has to make unforced errors for Florida to win this game. Like, you're hoping you're able to win this game cleanly and just go from there.
Was that loss the biggest heartbreaker of the Paris era so far? I think that and the Auburn game are maybe 1A, 1B, just depending on how you view both teams. And obviously we know what both teams went on to accomplish last year. Maybe the Auburn game is more because you led the entire way until the final couple seconds.
Trying to think back. I mean, in terms of last season, sure. I think that is definitely, that one was definitely a heartbreaker with the Florida game. I think that one you should have won. The Auburn game, look, you missed free throws at the end, and that's why you lost ultimately. I mean, you had Auburn on the ropes, and you could not close the deal. And that was the problem with this team so often last year. It wasn't just those two games. There were handful of other games that Carolina ended up losing by single digits where it's like they're right in the middle of that game where they have the lead. They just simply could not get it done. That's the thing that troubled them so often last year. They've been a little bit better about that this year. Still not great, but look, this team is definitely, I would say, where they're at currently record-wise, they're probably a little bit better than last year. Again, they're at 2 wins right now in conference play, which is just as many as they had last year. But the one thing South Carolina is truly missing this year, like they've beaten LSU, they've beaten Oklahoma, but those are two of the worst teams in the SEC right now. You're really missing that kind of like upset signature win that's like nobody expected you to get that win and you got it. Like if South Carolina is going to make better upon this season, then you got to win some of these games, especially the ones at home. You had a whiteout tonight. It's a 9 p.m. tip. Hopefully it's a decent crowd. I know South Carolina hasn't been playing too well overall, and they haven't given anyone much reason to show up to CLA. But hopefully it's a decent crowd tonight, and that could certainly play to their advantage, especially if they are able to get off to a quick start.
Yeah, it's one of those things that you beat LSU, you beat Oklahoma, and I think we looked at both those teams, said, okay, South Carolina on paper is probably better than both those teams, and you got another game against LSU coming up here on Saturday, but I don't think those wins really move the needle a whole lot. But the way this team is designed to be offensively, if you have that kind of night where making your threes, those shots are falling, you're getting to the line, making your free throws, I think you're capable of beating anybody you play. You just have to have all the stars kind of align, and maybe that's tonight. Again, as we talked about the other day, when you kind of view these last couple games in the month of January, if you could find a way to win 2 out of 3 between A&M, Florida, and LSU, you set yourself up to still be playing for something when the month of February starts. Again, still an uphill battle, but you still have some kind of realistic shot to maybe do something with your conference slate. But if you lose this game tonight, and then, again, theoretically, you could still go on and beat LSU on Saturday, you'd still be at 3-6, and I just think that's too big of a hole to climb out of.
Like right now, South Carolina, according to Ken Baum, is projected to go 15-16 this season and 6-12 in conference play. So they have South Carolina winning 2 games right now for sure, with Missouri and Mississippi State both favored to win those games. The rest of the games, I mean, you're right. If they lose to Florida, they move to 2-6, and then you have to beat LSU on Saturday. That is unquestionably, you've got to win that game.
Yeah.
But tonight would be nice if you could win this game tonight. You beat LSU on Saturday. You're 4-5 in conference play, and I'm not saying that's going to change everything, but it definitely gives you a little bit of juice and momentum, and especially with so much left to go in conference play, you'd be at the halfway point of conference play and you're 4-5. I think a lot of people would probably take that, all things considered, given that South Carolina couldn't finish these these games against better opponents in non-con and how bad they were last year, that would be a big sign of progress, especially getting a win over Florida tonight.
We'll see if the whiteout adds any more juice. I'm concerned that it's going if you don't have a good solid crowd. And I know they're doing the $5 tickets. The whiteout can kind of make the crowd look worse, right? Because when you have empty seats, they can kind of blend in with the audience and stuff like that. But when everybody's wearing one solid color like white, if you don't have a strong enough crowd, that's going to look really rough on TV. So hopefully you get a good showing tonight.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see if they can, but they need it for sure.
Again, late tip tonight, 9 o'clock, and fingers crossed we'll have some positive things to talk about with this basketball team coming up tomorrow as we're recapping that game. We've been talking all week long about the tampering beef between Ole Miss and Clemson. We've heard both sides of the story in the past couple days. Which side do we fall on? We'll discuss that coming up next. It is The Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Veltri with you on your Wednesday on the game.
If you're a small business owner, a church, or other entity in need of a new HVAC system, AAA Heating and Air has exciting news for you. AAA now offers financing to qualified organizations to aid them in installing a new light commercial HVAC system. It's as easy as calling AAA Heating and Air for a quote or finding them online at callAAAtoday.com. Tell them Jack Feltry from 107.5 The Game sent you over. At AAA Heating and Air, they've got your back. They're offering up to 12-month payment plans on repairs with no credit check. That's right. No need to worry about your credit score. As long as you're a homeowner with a valid bank account, you should be good to go. Take control of your comfort today by giving a call to AAA Heating and Air at 803-677-1500. Again, the number to call AAA Heating and Air, 803-677-1500. Give them a call today and breathe easy again.
All right, welcome back in. Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Veltri with you here on your Wednesday on the game. In the past handful of days, the story that's really been sweeping college football is the ongoing saga between Ole Miss and Clemson in reference to Luke Farrelly and tampering and all that kind of stuff. We had Dabo Swinney's press conference on Friday where he left no stone unturned in terms of the details of what was said and how Luke Farrelly has now ended up at Ole Miss. And in the past 2 days, we've gotten perspectives from both sides, Jack. We had Chappell Fowler from the state newspaper on Monday to talk about things from the Clemson perspective. And then yesterday we had Chase Parham on from Rebels 24/7 talk about things from the Ole Miss perspective. So I want to kind of go back through some of the things that they had to say in the past couple days, starting off with Chappell Fowler, just kind of giving the overall details of what exactly went down with Luke Farrelly.
Yeah, so that's one key point to it, and they kind of downplay this in the presser. So he had signed his financial aid agreement, which kind of triggers, okay, now you're on scholarship, now you're out of the portal. So once that happened, that's kind of like the baseline of their argument. Like, it is tampering because he had signed a scholarship agreement. What he had not signed was a rev sharing agreement. So that was something that Larry at Tiger Illustrated had reported, and something Dabo kind of acknowledged himself when he said that they had only verbally agreed, was the phrase he used, verbally agreed to a contract offer. So, that's all of his actual earnings and stuff. But he was signed as a scholarship player. He was enrolled. He had a university email address. He had a sociology major. He was in the directory. He was doing workouts. He was obviously in that 8 a.m. class when Pete Golding texted him. So he was, 99% there. And I don't think it's particularly unique for some of these rev sharing deals to maybe get verbally agreed upon, and then they don't get fully hammered out with every single little line and bonus and detail till later. And obviously Clemson didn't have any reason to worry there up until late last week. So, yeah, he was about as close to being totally locked in and part of Clemson this spring semester as he could be before he left.
Now, that's an important piece to remember there. He had not signed the NIL agreement with them yet. And when we talked to Chase Parham yesterday, he thinks that this possibly could have been a worse look for Clemson at the end of the day.
I frustrated a lot of the Twitter contingent for Clemson the other day because I said in some ways, if that is the max punishment, it's possible that this is a worse look for Clemson than Ole Miss as we move forward, because Ole Miss fans are simply going, hey, Lane Kiffin and LSU offered one of our defensive tackles $2.5 million the night the portal closed. He wasn't in the portal. We've been dealing with this. Welcome to our world. We got the player. He's going to be suited up in Oxford. Luke Farrelly, the all-ACC freshman linebacker, all that stuff. He's going to be playing for the Rebels this season. We just simply did what we had to do, whereas Clemson now, I think it's really complicated. In so many ways, it's, hey, Dabo's doing the right thing, and he's built his career off being, the moral high ground. And I don't mean that sarcastically. I mean, he has. He's sort of put forth this, hey, if you're committed, you don't take visits, all these different things. It's just not the world that is operating. It definitely is not the operating world in the SEC or at the top level of the portal. And I think it creates this odd juxtaposition where everybody's in a weird spot right now.
And it's very true. It is a very weird spot for both programs. And, again, there's so few guidelines on all this, which is why something like this has happened. But let's look at this. Okay, Clemson's perspective is they had done almost everything to lock this guy in. He was on campus, taking classes, had a university email address, had signed his financial aid agreement. They had just not put pen to paper when it came to his NIL. But by all other indications, he was a Clemson Tiger. The Ole Miss side of things is, well, you left that door open, which means we could swoop in there and grab him if we wanted to, just like LSU had been doing to us with Lane Kiffin and poaching talent and all that kind of stuff. So at the end of the day, it's fair game. Now that we've heard all sides of this, Jack, where do you fall? Like, who do you side with either one on this?
My question is, and honestly, I wish this is something that I just thought of. It's something I should have asked Chappell the other day when we spoke with him. Why didn't Clemson get Farrelly signed with the NIL deal? They got everything else done, but why? What was the holdup with the rev share NIL side of this thing? That's something I wonder, because if they gotten that done, this could have all certainly been avoided. Now, to be fair, Ole Miss could have still come out here and poached Farrelly away from Clemson either way, because, like you said, Tyler, there's no rules, there's no regulations, no barriers to stop a team like Ole Miss from coming out here and doing exactly what they did, which was offering a larger amount of money, paying the buyout, and steering him away from Clemson. So the way I look at this is I try not to fault the player because it's the adults in the room that are at fault for this. I understand where Clemson's coming from. I understand their frustration. I also understand where Ole Miss is coming from the standpoint of, look, they've had players poached by Lane Kiffin, and they're not the only school that has to deal with this. Clemson and Ole Miss are far from the only programs, I'm sure, that are dealing with this. It's just more publicly than what we do know out there. There's probably stuff that's going on that we're just not publicly aware of. Ultimately, the way I look at it is I fault the NCAA more than anyone in this case, which may be surprising because you look at it, it's like, oh, Ole Miss is clearly at fault here, or Clemson didn't do enough to get this thing done. Both things can be true, but the NCAA's got to have some rules and regulations in place, and the fact that we are how many years now into the transfer portal, like with NIL and whatnot, like 5 or 6 years with NIL.
Yeah.
And there's just, it's the Wild West, man. It's just kind of ridiculous that an organization like this doesn't have some set of rules in place, and they're probably not going to do anything about this. Quite honestly, they may give Pete Golding a 1-game suspension, slap on the wrist, a little bit of a fine, but that's nothing and doesn't prevent schools from, if they see that's the precedent and punishment that's being set, that's not really going to stop them from going out there and continuing to do stuff like this.
It definitely shows how screwed up all this is because you can understand the perspectives from both sides. And again, we're third-party observers here. Obviously, it's a little bit closer to home because it is Clemson there in the upstate. But, you know, if we're in Clemson's shoes and somebody came and snatched a talent off of South Carolina's transfer portal list, you know, days after bringing them on campus and putting them in classes and all that kind of stuff, we'd all be very upset about it. On the flip side of things, if South Carolina went and grabbed a talent the way that Ole Miss did, and we said, hey, well, they should have locked him in with the NIL agreement and this wouldn't have happened. Like, you can understand the argument from both sides. And the obviously the methods of which Ole Miss did this with the texting and all that kind of stuff that Dabo brought to light definitely makes it seem a little slimier, but you can tell they're not afraid. And that's something that we talked about with Chase Parham yesterday. It's like, what are they going to do? Like, do we really think the NCAA is going to drop the hammer on Ole Miss and give any sort of punishment that prevents anybody else from doing this? Not necessarily. Yeah, they could suspend Pete Golding for the season opener against LSU. Ooh, yeah, that's going to show them. Or they could take away some recruiting hours and maybe levy a fine, but nothing about that is going to stop Ole Miss or anybody else from continuing to do these things until we get legitimate regulations put in place. And unfortunately, I just don't have the faith that this is going to be the catalyst for that change happening. And Dabo Swinney can scream it from the mountaintops as much as he wants. I just don't know if it's going to move the needle the way that we need it to.
And I feel bad for Dabo because I agree with him fully on his take on this. And I understand it. I actually feel bad for Clemson in this case because it's like they really got screwed here. They got gypped, in my opinion, because they had this really good linebacker who, like Chappell said, this was probably the best player they got out of the transfer portal. And to have that just stripped away from you by another team that just decides to offer more money, that's a bit bush league in my opinion. But I just hate that there was a loophole in all this of, oh, they didn't get him signed with rev share and NIL, so that gave Ole Miss a window. That shouldn't have happened, first off. Like, if he's already enrolled in classes and he's at school and everything, why was this not done? That's my question here that I wish I had the answer to. I just don't know, quite honestly. But I understand it. I get the issues with it. But at the end of the day, the NCAA's got to do more about it. And if history tells us anything, nothing's probably going to come away from this that'll change everything moving forward.
Yeah, probably not. So there's a lot of things that need to be fixed across college sports. This is obviously one of the most glaring things that I don't know if it's going to happen. One thing we can fix, though, is rules on the football field. And there's one extremely controversial rule that is going to be looked at this offseason. We'll discuss that coming up next. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Feltry with you here on your Wednesday on The Game.
The problem is no one knows what targeting is. We do have rules, and there are parameters and bullet points and indicators. Those are all written down. No one knows when they see it. Imagine we're going to eject kids from games, but we don't really know what we're ejecting them for. There's no consistency in the way it's applied. Even conference to conference, the thing's enforced differently.
Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Felcher with you on your Wednesday here on the game. That is Josh Pate of the Josh Pate College Football Show discussing one of the most controversial topics for on-the-field stuff when it comes to college football, that being the targeting rule that we've had for over a decade now. I believe 2013 was the first official year of the rule. It's been tweaked a little bit since then, but gosh, Jack, I can't remember for how many years now we've been talking about this rule needing a massive overhaul, and thankfully it looks like we finally may get that this offseason.
Yeah, no, it definitely does need an overhaul. Like we need to know what, like, there's so many times in a game where you kind of look at a play and you see targeting happen. You're like, really, what is targeting? We have the same question about what is a catch? Mm-hmm. What is a touchdown? Like all these different aspects of the game that we don't have a clear, definitive answer on. And so I think having something with this, especially that can be so impactful in the game, because when you get targeting, especially if it happens in the second half, you're missing the first half of next week's game. So that becomes really tricky, especially if it's a really good player we're talking about. So I'm glad we're getting some progress on this.
I've always been okay with the spirit of what the targeting rule is supposed to be, where, again, you're trying to prevent blows to the head and neck, because, again, that's where serious injuries occur. And as they often say, a lot of the times you're protecting the defender making the tackle even more than you are the person being tackled, because, again, they're the one, causing the blow and all that kind of stuff, and they can do more damage to themselves if they're not careful. And look, there have been plenty of egregious hits over the years that you look at and say, yeah, that there's no reason that should be in the game, and guys leaving their feet and stuff like that. In fact, I think the NFL could benefit from having a rule where they're able to review nasty hits and make sure they have the correct call on the field. And that's one thing that college football has done well, by giving the ability to look at it on replay and review it to possibly overturn it. Because I don't have a problem with erring on the side of caution, because if you watch enough football games, there'll be plenty of hits you see at full speed that look vicious, look nasty, and they throw the flag, but then you go over and look at it and say, oh, well, actually, hit him with the shoulder. He did turn his head. Like, it's not as bad as we thought it was. You're able to pick up the flag, move on, and get back to playing the game. But we still have a kind of one line in the sand when it comes to what the penalty is in terms of ejections and all that kind of stuff. Now, I believe they've corrected it where you don't have to leave the actual sideline anymore. You can stay out there even if you've been ejected, because I thought that was silly that you had to shame the person by sending them to the locker room. So I believe that part's been changed. But, and this is what people have been clamoring for the past handful of years, possibly a flagrant 1 and flagrant 2 type of targeting, to where you can still assess a penalty, but we need to recognize that some things are intentional and some things are not.
I agree. And I think the difference between the flagrant 1 and flagrant 2, I think the flagrant 1, I think both penalties should definitely still be 15 yards. The only difference I would say is if it looks intentional. But here's the thing. How can you really decipher what's intentional and what's not? I guess if a guy's like trying to pull away at the last second and it's just like a collision, like if it's intentional, make it a flagrant 2 and eject the guy from the game. If it's not intentional, it's more of a judgment call than anything, which
it is.
I don't know. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, but I understand the thinking behind it.
If you see an instance where, all right, Jack Veltri is a wide receiver that's coming across the middle, catching a pass, and I'm the safety bearing down on you, and I leave my feet, and I point my head, the crown of my helmet, directly at your head, and I launch, and I hit you that way, that is egregious. That would qualify in the flagrant 2 range, 15-yard penalty. And, I don't know if you still assess a 2-quarter penalty or if you can change that, but some kind of further action being taken more than just the 15-yard penalty to discourage me as a defender from wanting to ever do that again, as opposed to you're catching the ball over the middle, you're up in the air. As you're coming down, I am attempting to make the tackle. I'm trying to contort my body to not hit you high, but in the course of you falling back down to earth and me coming to make the tackle, I make contact to your helmet when I tackle you. That's not egregious. That is something that was incidental. And honestly, we see those things overturned sometimes, not all the time. But that's one of those things that if it's still a nasty enough hit, sure, give it a 15-yard penalty. But I was not intentionally trying to hurt you with what I was doing. And that is where we can say, okay, I don't think I deserve to be ejected because of that.
Yeah, so I think we all kind of want to see some better result of these penalties, is just a little bit more clarity, right? And I think we need to, it's always confused me why we're not at a point where the NFL and college football almost don't have pretty much identical rules. Like there's some things with the pass interference penalties that you throw the ball 50 yards downfield in the NFL and you get a pass interference. Oh, it's a 50-yard penalty instead of just a 15-yard penalty like it is in college. Like I would hope we would kind of get to a point with that being the same, especially with like a targeting type of thing. The way college does it is good, but it's flawed. And so there is needed improvement, and we're definitely seeing that here.
Yeah, and again, I appreciate the fact that we do have a review process where you can go back in and overturn it. But as Josh Pate pointed out there in that clip we played a second ago, when you watch enough games, there are plenty of instances where I look at situations that they're reviewing like, oh, well, that's definitely targeting, and then they pick up the flag. Or, well, that's not targeting. That guy was trying to get his head out of the way. Again, you can't I've always heard a football tackle being described as a car crash, right? Where you have two bodies oftentimes running as fast as they can, going at each other, one trying to avoid, one trying to make the tackle. You can't choreograph that to look perfect. You know what I mean? There's going to be incidental contact to sensitive areas on the body like the head and neck by just running two people into each other, running as fast as they possibly can. So there have been instances where I've looked at some of these things that they're reviewing saying, oh, well, the defender didn't mean to do that, but they're still penalized and they're still ejected. So uniformity with this also needs to come into play, too, of like, as he mentioned, all the conferences need to get together with their officiating crews, figure out where that line is of what is a penalty and what isn't, so we can see this addressed more uniformly across college football, because I can tune into a random game and not know which way they're going to go with some of these things because everybody has their own interpretation of what targeting is and what it isn't.
Yeah, there should be clear, definitive logic and just sense of, okay, what is a targeting penalty, right? Now, if you lead with the crown of your helmet and you hit the guy in the the shoulder, upper head area, then yeah, like that should probably be targeting. But I think we just need a little bit more clarity on it, because again, like you said, Tyler, I think everyone is different with their interpretation of what it is, and I just think we need to come down to one sensible way to look at it of, here's what targeting is, and that's what it's going to be by definition.
And again, when somebody is unintentionally, or when somebody unintentionally hits a defenseless player high, then that, to me, doesn't warrant having to sit out. And that's another thing too. This whole, all right, if you are penalized for this in the first half, right? The last play of the second quarter, you commit a targeting foul. Well, then you just got to sit out for the remaining 2 quarters of the game. But if you end up sitting out, or if you end up committing the penalty in the last play of the fourth quarter, then you got to sit out the first half of the next game. Like, we got to also figure out, if we are going to keep suspensions in this, a more efficient way of doing this where there's not these wide gaps in what this penalty can be, because you can end up sitting out an entire game or just 2 quarters, 3 quarters, depending on when the penalty happens. We have to figure that part out too.
I just think suspensions are a bit much in this case, especially if it's not intentional. Now, if you want to assess a suspension after the fact by taking a deeper look at what it was, and if it looked intentional, by all means, go ahead. But I think just immediately suspending a guy, even if it wasn't intentional, for the fact that it just happened in the second half, I don't like that, and that's something I always have wanted to see changed, and hopefully that will be a fix.
Yeah, like a midweek review of like, all right, we're going to look at all the targeting penalties from the weekend, see if any of those warrant further suspensions from the players. Hopefully you wouldn't have a lot of those. But yeah, that's a good idea of like, all right, after the fact we'll review it, not this in the moment. All right, now you're gone for the rest of the game and the first half of the next game or whatever.
Yeah, so that hopefully there will be lots of improvement and change with this because it definitely does need it.
We'll hit a Would You Rather Wednesday coming up next as we wrap up hour number 1 here on the game. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Veltry along with you here on your Wednesday on the game. Again, tonight, men's basketball in action, taking on Florida, 9 o'clock tip. Pregame coverage starting at 8:30 right here on 107.5 The Game. Women's team in action, another late tip for them. Tomorrow night, taking on Auburn, also at 9 o'clock. Pregame coverage start at 8:30 on our sister station, B106.7 FM. As we wrap up hour number one, it is a Wednesday, which means it's a Would You Rather Wednesday. Jack, you ready for today's question?
Let's hear it.
As we get set for the Super Bowl coming up in a week and a half, would you rather watch a Super Bowl that is a runaway blowout like last year's was, or watch the national championship be a runaway blowout? What is the more enjoyable experience of watching a blowout game, the Super Bowl or national championship?
I'm going to go with the Super Bowl, and not for any of the reasons that have to do with the game itself. First off, you have the halftime show, which, if it's a runaway blowout by halftime, kind of like what it was for the Eagles-Chiefs game, if I'm remembering correctly, it was a definitely was starting to get away from the Chiefs early on in that game before the second half was just completely runaway. Like we said, Tyler, you get a decent halftime show. That's entertaining. The other part of it is most people have Super Bowl watch parties, so you got that aspect to it. With the national championship, I don't find myself doing those same things of having a watch party and there's halftime entertainment. Like I know the national championship has had that before in the past, and but I think the Super Bowl is just a much more entertaining. Plus, you have the commercials for the Super Bowl. So if it's a blowout, there are far more reasons to pick the Super Bowl as opposed to the national championship.
Yeah, did they have a halftime show for the national championship the other week?
I was about to ask because I didn't want to sound like I didn't know, but like I really don't. Like honestly,
I don't recall there being one. They have done it in years past, but I don't think they had one. I know they had like the pre-game like concert, like Pitbull was out there doing stuff outside the stadium, but I don't believe they had a proper halftime show.
I think they would have better advertised it if that were the case. But
didn't Travis Scott that did one when they were in Atlanta a couple years ago?
Yeah, I think I do recall that. Yes, so they have done it before, but again, it just doesn't hold up the same as what the Super Bowl is, because you have even when the game is not being played, there's just so many other reasons to watch. Like people probably watch the Super Bowl for the halftime show alone, obviously, but with the commercials, I mean, that's the thing. Like for most sporting events, like big sporting events, like how often can you say, man, I'm going to watch this game for the commercials? Well,
and that's what makes the Super Bowl unique. And, you tip your hat to the NFL because legitimately a third of this country's population watches the Super Bowl every single year. And a lot of those people care nothing about the football game being played, but you have people tuning in for the commercials, tuning in for the halftime show, and all that. It's truly an event that has something for everyone, which is so unique. And obviously, again, the NFL figured out that formula years ago, and they've been printing money ever since. I like to call the Super Bowl an entertainment extravaganza more than a football game, because yes, you have the football game, but the money is being made through so many of these other avenues. And even when the crowds at Super Bowls, a majority of them are the high-end corporate types, not necessarily your complete rabid football fans. I've always heard the Super Bowl atmosphere is kind of sterile too. I've never been to one, but compared to what you have for conference championship games, they say the Super Bowl does not compare to those things.
It definitely feels different because, again, you're pricing out the average NFL fan that would go support their team normally for any other game. But because it's the Super Bowl, and I haven't looked at prices yet, but typically it's in the high thousands. And when you factor in parking, hotels, and everything in between, it's so unaffordable for the average American. And you're right, it's more so for the big-time celebrities. That's why you always see celebrities at this game every single year, regardless of where it is, and the corporate folks and all that. Like, the people that can afford it will probably go. But for us, it's never going to happen.
Yeah, it's one of those things you'd have to win tickets to it or something like that for the average person to get the opportunity to go to it. And I scoured through Ticketmaster the other day and saw some stuff of if you just want, a seat in the lower bowl in Santa Clara, you're talking $30,000+. And it's like I can't fathom how having that much disposable income be like, yeah, let me drop $30K for a ticket to a 4-hour game.
Like for some folks, that's half their salary. Like in some cases, that's actually their entire salary. That's insane to think about. And I can't believe we've gotten to a point. This has been the case for years now, as we're kind of going off topic from the would you rather discussion. It's like, how have we gotten to a point where the Super Bowl is so expensive? I get high demand, I'm sure. But there was probably a time 30, 40 years ago where the Super Bowl tickets were not this expensive and affordable for the average people.
I don't think the first Super Bowl even sold out.
I think the tickets were probably like a few dollars at most.
Yeah.
Wish we can get back to that.
Well, I don't expect that to change anytime soon, so certainly don't get your hopes up. 1 hour in the books, hour number 2 on the way. How good was this college football season? We'll discuss it next on the Extra Point here in the game. It's all right here for our friends over at Twin Peaks. Do you consider yourself a bourbon connoisseur? Then you belong over at Twin Peaks. They are proud to pour an exclusive and extensive collection of rare bourbons, whiskeys, and tequilas, including their barrel selects. They're handpicked by their team and bottled just for you. Supplies are limited, so check out your local lodge to see what's being poured. And cheers to rare finds with great times over at Twin Peaks. Of course, as we get set for another full weekend of sports, whatever you're taking in, get down to Twin Peaks and watch it with the crew over there. TV is as far as the eye can see. Tons of delicious food. And do not forget to order yourself one of those 29-degree draft beers to complete the atmosphere there over at Twin Peaks. Get down there today, tomorrow, or this weekend. Twin Peaks eats, drinks, and scenic views. Welcome back in. Hour number 2, Extra Points. Outhead and Jack Veltri with you here on your Wednesday on the game. Can you believe it's already been 9 days since we crowned a national champion?
Yeah, I can. The season is in the books, and quite frankly, probably should have been over weeks ago because, as I've said before, I just wish we'd have a better schedule figured out where we don't need all this time off in between games. Like, let's just get the games going, keep the magic going from the regular season, because it just feels different going from the regular season to the postseason. And I wish we still had that same feel and got the season done by like New Year's Day, played at the Rose Bowl. You know, I'm that type of guy.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see for next year, because for those that haven't heard, next year's national championship will be on January 25th, so even later than this year's was. And of course, you're still going to have your quarterfinal games on New Year's Eve and New Year's Day at the respective bowls there. But I don't think we've gotten an official announcement of when the semifinals are going to be. So you have the option of playing the semifinals about a week later, like January 7th and 8th, and then having 17 days between the semifinals and the national championship. Or you look at a situation where you play them on, like, I don't know, the 14th or the 15th. So then you have 2 weeks between the quarterfinals and semifinals, and then like another 13 or another 10 days between the semifinals and the national championship.
Just makes my head explode. It's insane how long of a break there's. And not to mention, there's a huge break between conference championships and then the first round of the playoff. And that's assuming the playoffs start right before Christmas like they have in the last few years. So the schedule is all out of whack, honestly. That's a whole nother topic that we could cover in a much longer segment. But yeah, to kind of answer your question, it's I'm kind of glad the college football season's over. It's a long season, and we need a little bit of a break now. College basketball is going to be getting going, golf starting, baseball will be here soon. It's a good little break before spring football heats up.
All that being said, now that we have finally closed the book on the season itself of the games being played, how good was it? Like in your opinion, scale of 1 to 10, you can use decimals if you want. How do you rate the season?
I would say probably like an 8 out of 10. I think I enjoyed the season prior more because that was when we got so much parity. And for South Carolina, they were a lot better. And I think that made it a much more enjoyable experience, I think, for working, but also from the standpoint of, I think college football was just better in 24 compared to 25. Not to say 25 wasn't entertaining on its own. Of course, South Carolina didn't do anything, but 25 as a whole, Indiana going undefeated, winning a national championship. What a great story that was. Miami going from being the 10th seed in the playoff, barely making it in, to being the team that goes all the way and is the runner-up, comes up just short in the national title game. Very good season. I think this was an entertaining one for sure. Not the best, but certainly a good one.
Yeah, I think like I'd probably go like 9 out of 10. I think the end result of what the national championship was between Indiana and Miami, if you'd have told anybody that back in like August, be like, well, that's interesting compared to the year prior where we had, Ohio State and Notre Dame, two of the bluest of blue bloods in the history of college football. I think, like, you're right. In 2024, it really felt like there were just landmines everywhere where you just didn't know on a given Saturday which ones were going to explode and which top team was going to go down and all that kind of stuff. And we had that this year, but I think the surprise of it all in 2024 made it a little bit more enjoyable because, of course, the NIL and the portal era has opened up the parity a lot since it really began back in 2021, but it really felt like 2024 was kind of a seismic shift where it really felt like on any given Saturday, just about anybody could lose to anybody, right? And the biggest catalyst for that was when Vanderbilt upset Alabama, something that we never thought would ever be possible in today's world of college football. But that to me was almost kind of like the starting point of just the mass chaos that's unfolded over the past, now 2 seasons. Obviously, this year you also had all of the teams at the top at the beginning of the year: LSU, Clemson, Florida State, that were all thought to be playoff teams and in the mix of their conference championships. None of those teams even came close to it, and two of them fired their coach. You know what I mean? So you went from the expectations to the reality of who was going to be at the top shift quite a bit too. But I had a lot of fun this year. It was a very enjoyable season. I might give the nod to 2024 a little bit, but very comparable.
The way I think I would probably remember this season, I remember 24 for the parity that was out there and just how unpredictable the season got with teams just pulling upsets right and left. Like there's nothing that's going to beat Vanderbilt beating Alabama in Nashville that night, and just seeing other upsets like that happen around the country throughout the year. The way I think I would remember this season, though, is just the amount of change there was with coaches getting fired at such a rapid pace, Tyler. I mean, there were coaches getting fired like a few weeks into the season, and it just never slowed down from there. And then you had the whole Lane Kiffin saga at the end of the regular season, and Ole Miss going on to play for a potential chance to go to a national championship with a guy that had never been a head coach before, in just his infancy of being a head coach, and Pete Golding. That was for those reasons right there, that made the season definitely more unique and a lot more entertaining to watch because you saw so much taking place throughout the year.
This season, definitely from a coaching storyline standpoint, exceeds anything that I've ever seen in my entire life. And part of that is due with the fact that we were pulling the trigger on coaches like James Franklin and like Brian Kelly in the midst of the season. And then, listen, we're going to be talking about what happened with Lane Kiffin for years, right? And naturally, because it's Lane Kiffin. But there might be an entirely separate 30 for 30 documentary on just his exit from Ole Miss alone. Forget whatever he ends up doing at LSU, how all that went down, and what's true, what's not, what he was trying to take with him, the clothes being left on the at the airport, the juice Kiffin being left at Ole Miss, all that is going to make a really compelling documentary coming up here in a couple years. And let's not forget, I know maybe kind of got lost in the shuffle with the holidays and everything, the Sharon Moore thing too. Literally a couple weeks before playing in the Citrus Bowl, Sharon Moore goes crazy and shows up at his mistress's house and threatening his own life. And I know he was in court the other day for it. It's kind of gotten pushed off to the side in terms of storylines, but that happened too. I know it was in December. It wasn't in the regular season, but like the stories around coaches this entire year were just insane.
Yeah, I forgot about the Sharon Moore thing. That was nuts. I couldn't believe what I was reading when that came out and talking about it on radio afterwards. Like, just absolutely nuts. So, yeah, and I wish the things we're talking about right now were more so just about what was happening on the field. And don't get me wrong, there were great stories on the field this season. Again, Indiana was hands down probably the best story of the year just because they were very good in 24. But what we saw them do this year was, I don't think anyone really expected that because they won the big games that nobody thought they probably could have coming into the year because that was their Achilles heel in 24 when they lost to Ohio State and then Notre Dame in the first round of the playoff. This year they overcame that and they helped them go all the way.
Besides Indiana and excluding off the field coaching stuff, what was the next biggest story? Like, what was the other thing from this year that you might think you're going to remember the most behind Indiana?
That's a good question. I do think it has to be the Lane Kiffin saga and Ole Miss kind of playing a lot better in spite of that. It just, we haven't, I can't remember a time where we've seen this where, and I know it's happened before, but to this extent of everything we laid out before of Lane's clothes being left out front of the ops building and just everything that went down there. And even way before that, the event that got this whole thing set in motion was Brian Kelly being fired midseason, which was crazy enough. So I think there's just so many events that transpired that led to the chaotic circus of this whole saga with Lane and LSU and Ole Miss. And I think that's probably got to be the next biggest story. From a pure football wins standpoint, one story I don't think we talk about enough and it probably would have been different had they won their conference title game. I think Virginia was a great story this year. Because I'm looking at the top 25, and I'm trying to figure out, okay, who's like the next best story behind Indiana? I'd probably have to go with Virginia because they were a 5-7 team in 24, weren't doing very well. And then under Tony Elliott have really taken a big step forward this year. They get the signature win over Florida State early in the year, and that kind of set the wheels in motion for them to have the success that they did. Of course, they come up short in the conference title game to miss the college football playoff. So that probably would have further enhanced the year that they had and the story and how we view them. Still, 11-3 is a very good season for Virginia.
Yeah, and it's funny because I think, Tony Elliott was one of many coaches that went into this past year probably on the hot seat, much like Brent Pry, his rival predecessor there at Virginia Tech. And, yeah, they went from having no more than 5 wins in his first 3 years to 11 wins. Now, yeah, that it's probably going to bother them for a very long time. They couldn't close the deal against Duke to win the ACC and make it into the college football playoff, but it's an incredibly remarkable turnaround that in any other year, if Indiana hadn't done what they had done, and to another degree Vanderbilt as well, then we'd be talking about Virginia a whole lot more. And that's another thing, too. Credit to Vanderbilt and credit to Clark Lee because winning the game against Alabama in 2024 was obviously a program-defining moment. They still ended up going 6-6, and we all wondered, with him and this spark plug of a quarterback in Diego Pavia, could they make something out of that in their second season together? And they did. They won 10 games. Like, that is something that has never happened in the history of that program before, and we'll see how they do, in the post-Diego Pavia era, but they've certainly done a lot of great things from the recruiting standpoint. NIL's where it needs to be. Like, we could now be talking about in the coming years, Vanderbilt is just a consistent contender in the SEC.
And one more thing I'll say on why I would pick 24 over 25 in terms of what's the better season. The reason we just mentioned right there, Indiana, Vanderbilt, those programs taking massive steps forward in 25, but it all started in 24 when Indiana won 11 games when nobody expected it, and they're getting college game day, and they're picking up some really nice wins. Of course, their season ended not too well 2 years ago, but Vanderbilt I think was the bigger story in 24 just because they're Vanderbilt, right? The SEC dormant for so many years. Then they go out here, pull off the upset of the year against Alabama. Like, the sequel to 24 was good, but it doesn't beat the original just because it's the same thing, just a bit more enhanced, which is fine. I think we enjoyed watching Indiana and Vanderbilt, those programs, do their thing this year, but there was something special about what those programs did to kind of rise from the ashes in that first year in 24.
Yeah, it would have been an even more remarkable story if, Indiana had done all this stuff in 1 year, right? Gone from being nothing to a 16-0 national champion. So, yeah, you kind of trace back those origins to year number 1 under Kurt Cignetti. But regardless, still a very fun season of college football. I enjoyed it, and I hope 2026 is just as good, if not better. We obviously know that the college football playoff is staying the same with a few minor tweaks coming up this next year. Greg Sankey's going to tell us what those meetings are like, how contentious they do get, as well as apparently a rule change that nobody was aware of until yesterday. I'll tell you about that coming up next. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Feltry on your Wednesday here on The Game. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Veltri along with you here on your Wednesday on the game. Of course, as we mentioned on Friday when the news broke, the college football playoff staying at 12 teams because, well, quite frankly, the SEC and the Big Ten could not come to an agreement on 16 or 24, so they stayed status quo with a few minor tweaks. I don't know about you, Jack, but do you imagine when these conversations are going on, we talk about, Greg Sankey and Tony Petitti, the commissioner of the Big Ten, not being able to agree on something, they're just pounding their fist on the table, screaming at each other till they're red in the face, or is like, no, I don't like that. No, we'd prefer to do it this way.
I would say the latter, probably. I'd like to think that's how it goes. I'm sure there's some frustration from time to time when they're trying to get something pressing figured out. But, yeah, I'm sure it's more so like, I don't even know. Like, they're not going to budge, essentially, is how I look at it.
Well, Greg Sankey the other day took us into detail behind the scenes of what exactly those conversations look like.
I have been told, I don't read this nonsense, that somehow there's this notion of we don't like it, don't get along. I have a great deal of respect for my colleagues, all of them. Yeah. And Tony and I in particular, we spoke twice last week. We'll speak again this week. We're working on collaborative problem solving. And if we don't agree, that's okay. Mm-hmm. The 12-team playoff has produced something through the month of December into January. So now it's fascinating to see the narrative. Oh, it's too late. There's nobody in this stadium who thinks this is too late in January. There's nobody on these teams, and particularly Miami. If we were at 4, they wouldn't be here. Right. The format would have determined that. So we expanded. You knew you needed some more time. You're trying to respect traditions while doing something new and innovative. And so we talked through those issues. Do we always agree? No. Does that mean we just go our own ways and we never speak or try to solve problems? Absolutely not. And I think there's a lot of respect in the room, but there are different views. And working through that might be on someone else's deadline that doesn't work with the needs, but we'll keep trying.
So, for one, yes, of course, everybody that's in Hard Rock Stadium playing for the national championship and that day is not going to complain about how late in the process it is. But when you poll the greater audience of college football fans, most of us would prefer the national championship to be done a little bit sooner, but that's a secondary point to this. Look, Greg Sankey and Tony Petitti are both very smart guys. They obviously are doing their jobs extremely well because they're raking in money left and right for their respective conferences. And I do think it's interesting because, Jack, do you remember during COVID when the Big Ten was trying to work with like the Big 12, the Pac-12, and the ACC to like create their own little alliance to like counter the SEC and with the scheduling and all that kind of stuff? And then at some point, the Big Ten was like, hey, wait a minute. We're a really strong conference. The SEC is a really strong conference. What if we started working together and we just made both of us a lot more money? And obviously, they've been very successful since then. So while like Sankey and Petitti may not be agreeing on the exact format, they do both agree that they want to make as much money as possible for both conferences, and they're doing a pretty good job of that. No,
they certainly are. And I'm going to be interested to see where these two decide to end up with the college football playoff. And hopefully next year we'll have expansion of some sort because we're heading in. When I say next year, I mean 2027. My apologies. When we're heading into 2026, we're still going to be stuck with the 12-team format with some minor tweaks. Going into 27, you hope by December 1st, 2026, when the deadline is to make a decision on the future of the college football playoff, they come to some sort of agreement. Now, the Big Ten, they want 24 teams. The SEC and everyone else wants 16. So I kind of hope we find a middle ground here and these two big powers in this sport decide to come together and do some good. But, yeah, they are definitely when we're talking about the power across college football and college sports in general, it's these two conferences, 1A and 1B.
I do wonder in terms of like the dynamic of how those meeting rooms are set up because, again, they hold all the power and the other conferences signed off of that in the memorandum of understanding saying, hey, we'll give you most of the power as long as you promise to include us in this kind of thing. Is like, are they just like sitting at the head of the table and anytime like somebody else tries to chime in, they're like, be quiet, mom and dad are talking type thing?
That's how I envision it. Like, these are the kids, like the Big 12, the Group of Five, the ACC, like those conferences are all the little kids here. But when we got mom and dad, I don't know who mom and who dad is in this case. You could flip-flop it either way, but it's definitely the SEC and the Big Ten with all the controlling power in this whole sort of thing.
Terry and I, when we talked earlier on this morning, he made a mention of starting to put a plan together for Media Days later on this summer, which is in Tampa. And at Media Days, every radio station pretty much gets the opportunity to meet and talk with Greg Sankey. And he came on the show with Jay and Terry last year, so I got the chance to meet with him and talk with him for a moment. I don't think you take too kindly to the question of like, all right, so in this whole dynamic, are you mom or you dad? And I don't think Petiti would like being asked that question either. No,
I don't think so, which is, I guess it's a good thing then, though. You haven't had a chance to speak to him yet, right?
Well, I have. I just didn't ask him that question.
Oh.
I made Jay laugh really hard because when Sankey sat down, this was like on Wednesday, so it had already been almost the entire week out there in Atlanta. You know how busy and chaotic Media Days is.
Oh, yeah.
When he sits down, I just said, busy week? And Jay was beside himself laughing at that because apparently he found that hilarious.
Oh, that's funny.
But getting back to the point of the college football playoff, again, we've already talked about it. 12-team playoff staying with a couple tweaks. All 4 power conference champions now get automatic qualifiers. So that means if those rules would have been in place this past year, Duke would have been in by virtue of winning the ACC. And then you have the Notre Dame rule, which means if they are ranked inside the top 12, they automatically make it into the field no matter what's happening around them. So, again, if you apply the rules to this past season, they would have jumped Miami because despite Miami being ranked above them, Notre Dame being in the top 12 would have taken that last at-large spot that Miami had. So that's how that would have looked. Apparently, as we learned yesterday from multiple outlets, there was also a change to the group of 6 representative that nobody apparently was aware of until then. Apparently now in 2026, the group of 6 spot does not have to be a conference champion. It just goes to the highest ranked G5 team.
Wow.
This feels like the most unnecessary rule change because 99% of the time, the highest ranked G5 team is going to be a conference champion.
I agree. And yeah, you're totally right about that. Like, I'm trying to think of like a case where there's been a highest ranked G5, G6, whatever you want to call it, G5, G6 team that hasn't won a conference championship. I almost think you have to win a conference championship as a G5 school to be ranked, don't you?
I mean, it's hard enough to get ranked as a G5 school anyway, because we went through a lot of like this year's rankings without any of them being in the top 25, right? Despite how good some of the teams in the American were doing, like North Texas and Tulane, who obviously ended up getting a bid into the college football playoff. But like, I just feel like based on the way the committee's chosen to rank these teams in the past, I don't see an instance where a G5, G6 team, whatever you want to call them, would end up being ranked above a conference champion.
Yeah, I've never thought. Yeah, that's how. Why is that even I guess for clarity's sake.
And I want to say almost all of the G5 conferences, with the exception of the Sun Belt, do like all the power conferences where the top 2 in your standings play for the conference championship. The Sun Belt's the only one that still has a traditional East and West. So I guess you're looking at an instance of like, okay, maybe, the team that finishes second in the East with only 1 loss to the team that finishes first could theoretically end up ranked above them if that team in first ends up losing the conference championship. But that is such a very specific thing that I feel like only applies to one conference. I don't feel like this change needed to be made. And I like, if you're going to include the G5, setting the bar of, hey, you need to be a conference champion too.
I get that. I guess there could be a scenario where, like, say you're an undefeated G5 and you're playing for your conference championship, and the team you're playing and you lose to in the conference championship is like an 8-4, 9-3 team that's not going to make the playoff. So what does that mean for the undefeated team, previously undefeated team that was ranked the highest? Well, they're probably still in, since, again, there's not a ton of G5 teams that are ranked. But, yeah, I don't think we'd get that situation very often. It probably still would be highest ranked G5 team that ultimately would be a conference champion.
Yeah, I guess that's a good way to look at it. They want to prevent a 9-3 team from getting in over in a 12-0 or an 11-1 team at that point in time. So that's possible. Again, I just don't know how many times this scenario comes into play, but I guess if they wanted to change it, the G6 is just happy they're still included, right? Like, at the end of the day, they just want to be a part of this thing as long as they can be, and for at least the third year in a row, they will be.
Yeah, I guess they just want the best team in this case. So,
speaking of the best, perhaps the best coach in NFL history, not going into the Hall of Fame. We'll discuss it coming up next. It is the Extra Point, Tyler Head and Jack Feltry on your Wednesday on the Game. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Belcher with you here on your Wednesday on the game. It is time for Who Sprung a Leak, brought to you by your friends over at American Leak Detection. And, well, this isn't going to go to a team. It's going to go to the people that vote for the Pro Football Hall of Fame, because somehow yesterday, Bill Belichick, 6-time Super Bowl champion as a head coach, 8-time champion when you count his assistant coach days, somehow not a first ballot Hall of Famer, Jack. I'm not sure how to figure this one. How do you not look at that resume and say, yeah, definitely put that guy in?
I'm befuddled by it. Now, apparently some of the reason I was watching on the ESPN monitor above us here earlier on when I think First Take or whoever was talking to Get Up, we're talking about it. Part of the reason apparently had to do with the Deflategate and Spygate and all those different things that happened in the early 2010s with those Patriot teams that were really good. But I mean, we're talking about a guy that has the second most wins in NFL history, only a few behind Don Shula. He's got 8 Super Bowls. I mean, every piece of criteria that he needs to meet, he's met. And he will go down certainly as one of, if not the greatest coaches in NFL history when it's all said and done. And it's a shame that he's not in the Hall of Fame on the first ballot. It's quite honestly just ridiculous.
Well, it's one of those things, and again, per the reporting, there were conversations apparently in this room where Spygate and Deflategate got brought up. Bill Polian was named as the person that could have been leading this conversation. He denied that, went on ESPN last night and said, that wasn't me. He says, I think I voted for Bill. I'm surprised he didn't get in, and all that kind of stuff. Even if that was the case, because Spygate was 2007, Deflategate was 2014. If you remove those seasons completely, winning 3 Super Bowls in 4 years at the beginning of the 2000s, that alone should get you on the first ballot as a Hall of Famer. Like, sure, if you want to take away those seasons where there were some, less than legal things happening when it came to the Patriots, fine. I still think the rest of his resume warrants being a first ballot Hall of Famer.
And he still won many Super Bowls after Deflategate happened. So,
but by the way, I thought Deflategate was the stupidest scandal maybe in sports ever.
I would say so. And it's not like that Colts team was going to do anything against the Patriots in their prime at that point. It's just not going to happen. And honestly, we look back at Belichick's career, not just with the Patriots, but what he did with the Browns and what he did earlier in his coaching career, working with the Giants as a defensive coordinator. Like, he has had a Hall of Fame career that goes beyond just what he did in New England. And that's going to be what he's known for, obviously. But this guy is just football through and through. And say what you will about how his college career has gone so far, coaching at UNC, which is irrelevant to this discussion.
That has nothing to do with this.
It's the Pro Football Hall of Fame, after all. But what he's done in the NFL, he will certainly go down as one of the greatest coaches. And it really is a shame that he's not like that's like leaving. That's like leaving Michael Jordan out of the Basketball Hall of Fame on the first ballot, or being the guy that didn't vote for Derek Jeter to make the Hall of Fame unanimously. Like, it's like that, in my opinion, and it's just quite frankly ridiculous. And honestly, the people that didn't vote for Belichick in this case need to be exposed. Like, they need to come to the surface, explain why they didn't vote for him, because that is just ludicrous, in my opinion.
I wonder, too, how much Belichick's general likability plays into this, because, again, there's no denying from a resume standpoint, he's one of the, if not the greatest coaches that we've ever seen in the NFL, but he rubs a lot of people the wrong way. Bill Belichick is uniquely himself, right? And that was part of the reason why things came to an end the way they did in New England. Part of the reason why he didn't end up getting a job after getting let go from New England. Part of the reason why he is having the time that he's having at North Carolina right now. He's just not the most likable person in the world, and that shouldn't factor in to these kind of decisions being made. And I don't know who all those people in that room are necessarily out of the 50 voters, but I imagine there's a lot of people in there that have personal feelings toward Bill Belichick of the person that he is that I think can weigh into this discussion.
And it's a good thing it's not the Hall of Fame of Boy Scouts here, because who cares if he's a nice guy or not? Like, I'm sure that plays some factor into this, just like it does with the other Hall of Fames and their criteria. But let's be honest. The guy has won 8 Super Bowls, 6 as a head coach, 2 as an assistant. He's a 3-time coach of the year. He is, when you think of the New England Patriots, you think of probably Tom Brady first and then Bill Belichick second. Like, he is the one of the main reasons why the Patriots have turned into one of the greatest franchises, and not just the NFL, but in all sports. I just think it is utterly ridiculous to leave this guy out if you have a personal vendetta or something against him for something that probably happened a long time ago.
Well, and you bring up Tom Brady, and I think that's an important note in this too, because when the split happened and Tom Brady left New England and went to Tampa Bay, the whole discussion was, well, was the success of the dynasty because of Tom, or was it because of Bill, or was it a combination of both? And I think Tom Brady going and winning a Super Bowl with the Buccaneers right away, I think that skewed a lot of people's thoughts and like, well, hey, maybe it was just Tom Brady doing the heavy lifting in New England and Bill Belichick was just an average coach without him, which I don't think is the case, but I do think that's something that can enter into a lot of people's minds in terms of what they think could have happened or how they view Bill Belichick. But I always bring up the point because I believe it was the season following the year when they lost to the Giants in the Super Bowl, they still won double-digit games with Matt Castle at quarterback. They didn't make I don't think they made the postseason that year, let alone the Super Bowl, but still, they were still a good team in a full year without Tom Brady. They made the playoffs with Mac Jones. Yeah, they didn't win the Super Bowl either, but, like, he didn't really start falling off until the last couple of years.
Like, let's not act like this is all just Tom Brady and no Belichick at all. I think they're the perfect – they go together perfectly, and that's why they won so much together. Whether they liked each other or not, who cares? Belichick obviously played an integral role. It's not like he didn't do anything to help get them to where they did. I mean, sure, Tom is a great quarterback and all that. That's why he had so much longevity in the NFL and was able to play well into his mid-40s. But Belichick's also deserving of some credit for this. I mean, let's not act like he didn't do anything with the defense or again, he was also the de facto GM and bringing in different guys over the years to help Brady out. So he deserves as much credit as Tom in this case. And I think Tom's going to get more credit because of what happened when they split and Belichick kind of falling off the rails in his last few years in New England and Tom winning a Super Bowl. But I think there is no Patriots winning the Super Bowls that they did and having as much success if Belichick's not the coach.
Yeah, it's utterly ridiculous. And, yeah, nobody's going to volunteer themselves as saying, yeah, I was one of those guys that chose not to vote for Bill Belichick. But they should.
That's the problem.
It's absolutely ridiculous. So, either way, he'll get in, just not as a first ballot.
He better get in on the second ballot.
Yeah, he better get in on the second ballot.
Because if he doesn't get on the second ballot, Tyler, then we got real problems going on.
Yeah, and again, you're a Bills fan saying this, so that
I can respect greatness.
That should, as we all should. Again, I don't like Bill Belichick as a person. I think he's turning into kind of a nut job with what he's doing at North Carolina, but that has no bearing on my thoughts of him being in the Pro Football Hall of Fame.
It should have no impact. Again, this is not the Hall of Fame of being a good Boy Scout. Who cares what kind of person you are? If you are a good coach or player or GM or owner, you should be in the Hall of Fame by your merits of what you did with your teams.
We'll see if they end up correcting that the second go-around, but not a first-ballot Hall of Famer this time for Bill Belichick. Come back, wrap up the hour, talk some racing with Jen Jensen as NASCAR returns this upcoming weekend, weather pending, that is. It is the Extra Points. Our head and Jack Beltry with you here on your Wednesday on The Game. All right, welcome back in. It is the Extra Points. Tyler Head and back with you here on your Wednesday on the game. We're almost to the month of February. That means racing is right around the corner. That means on Wednesdays, we return to our conversations with Jen Jensen for the 2026 NASCAR season. Jen, it's been too long, but I'm excited that hopefully, we see cars back on track this weekend.
Yeah, hopefully is the key word. We'd rather see that rather than plows. But it seems like the off season is long, but yet short at the same time. And I'm sure for the families of the crews and the drivers, it seems not quite long enough, but ready to go for a long season.
Yeah, so the Cookout Clash at Bowman Gray scheduled for Sunday night. Of course, as we all know here locally, some more winter weather coming in this weekend could possibly force a postponement. I just checked all of my sources. Nobody's given any more updates, but something should be decided on hopefully at some point today on what they're going to do there, and that would just be further delaying the off season or delaying the restart of the season a little bit more, but we're right around the corner from it, and quite frankly, we need it. Look, we talk so much about the off season being long and agonizing, but this one took on a different meaning of that, not only with the trial that went on in December that really put NASCAR in a bad spot with its fan base, but a lot of tragedy. You had the Greg Biffle situation with the plane crash with his family and those other people, as well as Denny Hamlin's parents in their house fire, losing his dad, his mom still in very rough shape after that. Like, we just need to get back to racing again to hopefully kind of put those things behind us.
Yeah, I mean, it would be great to see some joy and some happiness and, just kind of get back to the sport everyone loves, because there's just way too much sadness and drama in the off season.
Yeah, I almost forgot as well, Michael Annett also passing away, a former Cup Series and Xfinity Series driver. So just too many bad things happen over the course of a few short months that I think everybody's looking forward to just getting this restarted and focusing ahead.
Yeah, and especially when we have some really exciting things on the horizon to look forward to, like what we'll be talking about with the chase and everything. Yeah,
and that's the biggest positive headline of this entire offseason was the fact that NASCAR is returning to the chase, which they originally had from 2004 until 2013, where instead of the elimination-style playoffs that we've been doing for the past decade, you'll have 26 races, you'll have a reset, and the top 16 will enter into the chase, and then it is a 10-race run to the very end, and whoever has the most points at the end of those 10 races is crowned champion. A lot more simple, a lot easier to understand for people that aren't diehard fans like us, and I just think it's been very well received. I was excited for it. Drivers seem excited for it, and I think it's going to bring legitimacy back to a championship that's suffered in that regard the past couple of years.
I agree. I think getting back to this, it's going to really reward the full season consistency. It's not just going to be a one-off where, bless his heart, Stenhouse may win a race every couple of years. Having somebody like him who could possibly just jump in, or having a rookie get in there. I'm not saying that Shane Van Gisbergen didn't deserve to be in the chase because he is so dominant on the road courses, but not dominant yet in ovals. So you really want to see somebody who's had a good season overall be in that final 10 races.
Yeah, and again, it's a lot easier to understand, and that's something that they pointed out when they announced this the other week, that you can explain it in an elevator, right? 20, 30 seconds, you can get somebody to understand it. I was talking to my dad on the phone the other day, and I mentioned, oh, hey, did you hear that NASCAR's bringing the chase back? And he's like, good, because that playoff stuff is too complicated. And I've tried explaining the playoffs to people in the past, and you lose them in the first 20 seconds when you start explaining regular season points and playoff points, eliminations. It was just too complicated.
Oh, it really was. And, when you're needing all the graphs and charts to get through it, yeah, that's not a good thing.
Yeah, definitely not. And, again, the legitimacy of the championship brought into question because you're having people like Joey Logano that didn't have good seasons overall, wins a couple races at the right time, and boom, suddenly he's your champion. I think with the way this is going to work, and the reset will be to 2,000 points for everybody in the playoffs. The number one overall driver in points will get an extra 100, so they'll start with 2,100. Second will get 75, so they'll be at 2,075, and it'll go on down to 0 for who starts the chase in 16th place. So it's going to reward those people that have been running towards the top the entire year. If you are a low seed and you're 15th or something, you're going to have to put together the best 10 races people have ever seen to be champion. And I feel like even if that happens, people would be more understanding and accepting of that because you went on such a tear in those final 10 races like Tony Stewart did in 2011.
I was just going to say, and absolutely, because then, boy, they have earned it, they've worked it, and that's what you want to see. And you want to see people bringing their best every week and not having it be where, oh, my gosh, there was too much confusion and too much chaos in that other format. So, yeah, it's, again, rewarding consistency and hard work.
Well, and it also – the playoffs kind of clouded over everything, right? And that was another talking point was Steve O'Donnell saying, hey, I didn't like when William Byron wins the Daytona 500, and automatically we're talking about, hey, he's in the playoffs. Like, races like that should be able to stand on their own. We'll talk about making the chase as the season goes along, but that shouldn't be the storyline after race number one.
Right, and again, somebody who's doing really well in a race, and here we're talking about the last two people trying to get into the chase. So, yeah, the focus, I think, can be shifted, and it'll be better broadcast as well.
Yeah, sometimes getting back to simplicity works wonders. Again, we were doing complicated things with qualifying the past couple of years. They simplified that. We're going back to the chase now, which is simplifying the points format. I just think NASCAR's slowly reverting back to some of its original norms. Very positive. Again, a lot of praise from the fan base, and I'm excited to see this put into action this year.
Yeah, me too. And again, you're appealing to the base that you've had, but also if it's less complicated, you may be able to engage people who you're wanting to bring into the base.
Well, Jen, here's hoping this time next week we'll have an actual race to talk about this weekend. Fingers crossed the weather allows that to happen.
Yeah, that'd be great. Looking forward to this season.
Me too. Jen Jensen there from the early game. We'll talk to her coming up next week, hopefully about what happens in the Cookout Clash this upcoming weekend. That'll do it for the Extra Point. Coming up next, Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here on the game.
If you're out there looking for a local, reliable HVAC service for your home or your business in the Midlands, reach out to our friends over at Krantz Cooling and Heating, KrantzCooling.com, K-R-A-N-T-Z, cooling with a K, KrantzCooling.com, or give Justin Krantz, the general manager over there, and his team a call, 803-755-0793. I've had Krantz Cooling out to my home several times. They did a mini split for me in the garage. They've checked out all the other units at my house to make sure they're running in tip-top shape. Love my experience so much that when my mom moved to Irmo, I got them to go out to her home too. They put in 2 mini splits for her. They handle all her HVAC needs as well. They could do the same for you. KrantzCooling.com or 803-755-0793. Since 1983, Krantz Cooling, their team has been providing great service to business owners and families in the Midlands. They can do the same for you.
11 o'clock on your Wednesday morning. Welcome in Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler West, Chris, along with you here on the game. All right, I got the day right. I got the show right. I got all the names right. We're off to a good start.
Tyler's like practicing in the mirror.
I was about to say, dude, before you even said it, the day, check mark.
Yeah.
You didn't. Not only did you get the name of the show right, but there was no hesitation. It was a straight up Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler West and Chris, let's go.
Well, before I came in here for this segment, I did have my first sip of caffeine of the morning.
Dude, I knew it. I was about to say
that gave me a little extra juice.
Now you didn't have an Elijah gallon of Red Bull, did you?
No, I don't know how Elijah is still alive with the amount of caffeine he consumes on a daily basis.
There's an unnamed, because we're not going to give them.
No, of course not, unless they want to pay.
Yeah, right. So if you're an energy drink company, hit us up. Or Josh Yellman, Dreamy Josh. There's a big. At first I thought it was an energy drink can.
Yeah.
But it was like 2 or 3 times as big, and then it had the screw top on it.
Yes.
Is there actual energy drink in there, or is that just a branded cup?
No, those are you buy those at the gas station.
You can buy one that big.
Yes, you can.
That looks dangerous.
They're like twice the size of like a normal can.
It's like 3 times as big.
Yeah, you're packing a lot into those, and that will.
Oh my gosh,
they'll keep you awake.
But, and refillable.
And
it looks like.
Well, I don't know if you can refill it
survive.
easily, but yeah.
How could you get one? That must be Elijah.
When you go to the gas station, you go to the little cooler with the energy drinks. Look towards the top. That's typically where the really big ones are.
Okay. So
for somebody tall like him, it's perfect. You just reach up there, grab it, and maybe he can't see the ones at the bottom that are really small.
That's right.
Yeah, so maybe that's why he consumes as much
More
as he does.
bang for your buck.
Yeah, well, speaking of caffeine, I think we're going to need it for this men's basketball game tonight. 9 o'clock tip.
Another good transition.
Not a fan. 2 East Coast teams. What are we doing here?
That's
TV.
7 o'clock, man.
Yeah.
7 o'clock, please.
Yeah, I mean, that would make sense. Yeah, the odds of me, tomorrow. You know what? No, I'm gonna watch.
Well, of course you're gonna watch.
Well, it's not of course. It starts at 9 for me.
It's just how much can you keep your eyes open during the game?
Yeah,
because you get into especially if it's like a tight game and they're fouling late. Because like if it's a blowout, like the game against A&M on Saturday, that was done by like what 2:50. Because A&M had such a big lead. But you have a tight game, one team's fouling late, going to the line, reviewing, got to get the clock right. It's like, all right, it's 11:15. This game's still not over yet. I got to get the sound from Coach Paris after the game. Let's move this along.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Valid concern.
Valid concern. And my goodness, hopefully they can pull off an upset because we need some positivity with this team right now, real bad.
What? Yeah, we do. I don't really know what to say, to be honest. It's we've reached the point in the season where it's like if there's gonna be a run, it has to happen. It has to start now. I think.
Yeah.
Like you're running out of time.
What do you say? It's getting late early. Isn't that one of your sayings?
Yeah, I don't know. That's not mine, but I stole it from somebody.
Well, all good things are stolen.
Yeah. Michael Scott.
Wes Mitchell.
Yeah.
Whoever.
Wayne Gretzky.
Yeah.
But, and we had a poster on our board make a post like of the three outcomes that are possible, which is sort of like South Carolina goes on some type of big winning streak and actually makes this thing interesting. South Carolina just kind of, the season just basically goes in the toilet, so to speak, or the middle ground, what is most likely, and then what is the reaction from the fan base and the powers that be on, like, that particular outcome.
That outcome, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you, but that outcome being maybe like, oh, you won some games down the stretch, finally started hitting some shots, which you're going to have to do to win some games as this team is built, and then, like, miss the tournament.
Yeah. I mean, at this point, even, Tyler, you probably know better than, like, what even type of run would it take to even be in the conversation?
Oh man, you're
significant.
You're 2-5 right now, So, what, you got 11 more conference games to go? I mean, you're talking about having to win 8, 9 of them.
Yeah, and there's there are some very winnable games ahead, but you're gonna have to play better. Now, obviously beating Oklahoma and just taking advantage of that opportunity, I think it at least gives you some chance that we even have this conversation about going on a run, right? Now, unfortunately, the loss to A&M, guys, just yet another blowout. And I think that is one of the most frustrating parts for fans right now is the last couple of seasons, the number of games you've had like this that have just been completely out of hand. And, you don't want to be against SEC competition as an SEC program in multiple games every year where you can just turn the TV off halfway through the second half, and I think we all know in sports there are going to be games that just get away from you. Like, every now and then I'm saying.
Yeah.
There's going to be games where it's just not your day. Maybe you run into a buzzsaw and then everybody gets ticked off, but you just go, man, that just kind of happens in sports. It's just, I feel like, happened a few too many times. Even last year you had a ton of close games,
including against Florida.
Yeah, that you lost and arguably should have won, but you also mixed in with some games that just were not close at all. And then we saw that this past weekend with A&M this season.
Yeah, I mean, you look at how things have played out. I mean, there have been a couple of those, okay, time to turn the TV off games. You look at Arkansas, certainly the A&M game got out of hand. Carolina in it early, hitting some shots, but very quickly A&M heats up, makes, seemed like 30 three-pointers,
Only 17.
Yeah, seemed like 30 in a row.
Well, that one guy didn't miss but one.
That's right.
Yeah,
he hit like his first 6, I think. That game's over. A lot of the other ones closer. You're in the Georgia game. You're in the Auburn game. The Clemson loss, like, you got to make this matter, but, like, that's a quote-unquote quality loss. It's a competitive, pretty competitive game against what's turned out to be a really good Clemson team. But nobody, you made a run against Vanderbilt. You end up losing by 12, right? You have got to make this matter down the stretch. And, I mean, look, there are some things about this team that are features, like it's not a bug, it's a feature thing.
Yeah.
This is not going to be a team that is incredible defensively. This is not a team that's going to have great post presence. It's not a team, that's going to rebound the basketball very well. They haven't. And they're that part, you need to get incrementally some degree better there. The one thing that you can point to, if they can make a run at all, or if they're going to, they've got to just be better shooting the basketball. And a lot of times, guys, it's not necessarily you're looking at it going, that's a bad shot. Just a lot of them just not going down.
Yeah.
And that's been the biggest issue. You can't be, for a team that's built to shoot, where we're all going into this season saying, I know we said this a million times, but worth revisiting. If you're built to shoot, you can't be 13th in the league out of 16 teams in shooting three-pointers. That just can't happen for this team. And so if they're going to upset Florida, if they're going to go win some more games down the stretch and actually make this thing a conversation, like, that's the one area you can point to, because you feel like there's some capability there. It just has not happened. I don't know why. I really don't. But it just hasn't happened.
By the way, speaking of three-point shooting, if you're going into tonight's game wanting to see a lot of threes being made, wrong game for you. Because as bad as Carolina is at it, Florida's worse. They're 349th in the nation in three-point percentage out of 365 teams.
I was about to say, how many teams are playing now?
Yeah, 365 or 360 something.
That is hard to do.
So I'm not expecting a high volume of threes from either side tonight. So it's going to be one down in the paint. Florida's a really good rebounding team. They got more size than Carolina, so it's going to take a physical fight to beat, again, the defending national champions. But again, you played them close last year. They broke your heart there at the very end. So we'll see what happens tonight. White out game tonight. So if you're going, wear white. I think it's one of the $5 ticket games they've been doing too. So hopefully get a good crowd, because that is one thing you can control is what your atmosphere is. And we know Colonial Life Arena can be really rowdy when they want to be, and hopefully you get a good contingent of people that want to show up tonight and hopefully help will you on to winning this game.
Well, you have the students back as well. You know, you had that stretch where obviously you didn't have class, and, I think it's always a little bit difficult to fill the arena when you're in those situations. Now, if you are having a great year, those things tend to work themselves out. And I think people tend to, you won't have quite as good of a crowd, but people will kind of fill in the gaps. Well, when you're having, kind of a second straight to this point disappointing season, it's just harder to get people excited and get people involved and, just get them out for games that aren't necessarily, as exciting on paper. So I think getting the students back in there will certainly help. They'll show up to an extent. And I think we always talk in football about starting fast.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is a game where you're looking at it going, man, you don't want to lose what little edge you might get by having a crowd by just not playing well early on. Like, I think it would go a long way if you could get these students, give them a reason to cheer early on, and obviously kind of ride that wave of momentum.
Again, tip-off tonight at 9 o'clock, pregame coverage starting at 8:30 right here on 107.5 The Game. If you want to go to the game, I have one family 4-pack of tickets right now for caller number 4 at 803-404-6100. Compliments of our guy, Dreamy Josh. So hit the phone lines, 803-404-6100 if you want that family 4-pack of tickets. We'll dive into football coming up next. Position group number 2, the running backs. How do we assess that room now that we have all but closed the transfer portal cycle for South Carolina? That's coming up next. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs here on the game.
Yep.
All right, everybody, let's tell you about our friends over at Integrated Media, as we do every day. Michael, Nathan, their team, they've been to my home and Wes Mitchell's home. And, of course, they've helped us trick out the studio here at the game. All these TVs mounted, the game TV, our streaming setup. They can do anything that your heart desires, anything that you can dream of from an audiovisual or a tech standpoint at your home, or even if you're a business owner. IntegratedMediaInc.com. If you want to check out some examples of the past work that they've done at people's homes right here around the Midlands, Integrated Media Columbia on Instagram and on Facebook. You can also give Michael and Nathan a call at 803-948-8327. Everything from mounting new TVs, getting you the very best equipment, wireless sound systems, sound bars, security and cameras, and complete smart home systems where you can control your lights, devices, thermostats, everything in your home from the touch of a button on your device. That's Integrated Media, 948-8327.
Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler West and Chris with you on your Wednesday here on the game. Shout out to Tim for winning the tickets to go see men's basketball in action tonight as they take on the defending national champion Florida Gators over at Colonial Life Arena. Again, late tip, 9 o'clock. And if you're going to the game, be sure to wear white to be a part of the whiteout. Getting back into football now, we're going to go position group by position group. Yesterday we talked about quarterbacks. You know what the deal is there with Sellers being your starter. Knock on wood, as long as he stays healthy. We now move over to the running back room. And going into this offseason, we knew this was one of the higher priority rooms on this entire roster, purely from a number standpoint, because you only had 3 scholarship running backs. Of course, unfortunately, Carolina had not been able to recruit high school backs in the last 2 cycles, so you're kind of making up for lost time with what you went in there and added. And we'll get to the individual guys coming up in a minute, but when you look at the Beamer tenure so far, you can almost point directly at the running back room to kind of tell you almost what to expect out of that season sometimes, because we go back to 2023 where you didn't have what you needed in there, and Mario Anderson gave a valiant effort, but you had to convert to Kerryon Joyner to attempting to be a running back, and it didn't work out very well. Well, the next season you go out and get a guy like Rocket Sanders, who'd been an established 1,000-yard back in the SEC, and he goes out there and helps South Carolina have one of their best seasons in program history. This past year, you certainly had bodies in the room, but none of those guys quite materialized the way that you thought they were going to, like Faison, Augusta coming in late in the transfer portal cycle, and now you're looking at a room of a handful of unproven guys and guys returning for hopefully taking steps forward in another year here at South Carolina.
Yeah, and I think that sometimes it's also about the skill set of a running back. And, I think with some of the issues that we've all talked about on the offensive line, like to me, Faison was a guy that you just needed he needed room to operate, I feel like. And, I think one of the big positives for South Carolina, quite obviously, the year before was that you had Sellers breaking tackles at an unreal rate, and then you had Rocket Sanders, who was just this big, powerful running back who could break tackles as well. And I think those things added up over time to where, yeah, you had, I would still say, some better performances from your offensive line, but it did maybe kind of paint over some of your cracks in the foundation a little bit because of what those guys can do. And so, I don't know, to be fair, if there is a Rocket Sanders in this group either. You hope that one emerges, but, Rocket's a guy who came in and had already shown that he could be a well above 1,000-yard rusher in the SEC. Like, you just aren't finding many guys in the transfer portal that have that type of production at the level that you're already at in the SEC, and that just happened to work out for South Carolina. So to me, the question becomes, which of these guys is going to be able to take that next big step forward? Matt Fuller, I think Matt Fuller enters the offseason as the unofficial RB1. And I think from what we've heard, Drayton likes him a lot, likes the skill set. From what we've heard, there were some teams other than the Garnet and Black that also liked his skill set and were trying to shove him into the portal. Being able to hold on to him, hold on to Jordan Howell, I think will both be good kind of keeps for South Carolina. And then, of course, it becomes, what do we start to hear? It's too early to know yet. What do we start to hear about the addition of Christian Clark? What do we start to hear about the addition of Jabri Wallace-Coleman? And those being 2 guys that have not played a ton at the college level, but had legitimate high school credentials as top running back targets.
Yeah, 4-star guys. I think they've increased the competitive depth in that room. There was a question going into the portal cycle of, several questions actually. Who would you keep? And I think they did quite well to keep those 3 guys, because in those 3 guys that are returning from last year's roster, you have guys that all have a measure of experience in college. They're not, okay, this guy's a 3-year starter at either South Carolina or another school, and this guy rushed for 900, 1,000 yards in his career. Like, you don't have that. But you do have some guys that still have, I think, potential, have shown flashes of that potential, whether it's here or elsewhere. and guys that are going to be in the mix. You've got a reset, basically, right? You've got, for all intents and purposes for those guys, you've got a new offensive staff because you have a new scheme, a new run game, new offensive line coach, which will hopefully help raise the play of the offensive line. And then the running backs, you have Stan Drayton, a new running backs coach with a new set of eyes and evaluations on all these guys. How will he handle, the rotation for these guys? How many guys does he play? All those are valid questions. But I think we also went into this thing, okay, how many backs is South Carolina going to take in the portal? Do they go make a huge investment, a big swing on a guy, like a Justice Haynes type who went into the portal, no contact tag, clearly going to Georgia Tech? Is it that type of guy? Or do they go a little bit more volume? And when I say volume, that doesn't mean you're just taking bodies to fill the room. They got, I think, some different types of guys out of the portal. Sam Williams-Dixon played at a big school, pretty highly regarded prospect, hasn't played a lot at Ohio State, has played some. Jabri Wallace-Coleman has not taken any snaps, but a big-time, high school recruit. And then you've got Christian Clark, whose best game was his last game at Texas, sitting behind some others that had a lot more experience. And so all those guys are very intriguing. I think I'm with you, Wes. I think Fuller, if you have to circle one, like he's probably the guy you look at. I've heard that Stan Drayton thinks he has some goods, to eventually be the guy. But they're also going to give, I think, it's going to be one of those open competition, type slots.
Well, and as we know, you can't consistently play 6 guys in the running back room. There's going to be 2, possibly 3 that are going to get more run than the others. And we don't know if one's going to be far and away getting 80% of the carries like Rocket Sanders was a couple years ago, if it's more kind of an even split between a couple guys. But there are going to be some guys that just aren't going to play a lot. And in the old way of looking at rosters in college football, I think you would look at guys like Coleman, like Dixon, that haven't played as much as these other guys, saying, okay, those are guys you bring in, you work on developing, and then they're your backs for 27, 28, that kind of stuff. Obviously, now we live in a instant gratification type of thing where if they don't come in and play right away, they're maybe looking to go somewhere else, for 27 and beyond. So it's going to be interesting to see how this shakes out because all these guys, of course, in their mind are trying to compete for that number 1 spot. Fuller may have a little bit of an advantage having been here before. But again, when you have a new coach coming in, taking a look at this room that he's not familiar with the exception of Coleman, who is with it at Penn State, it can end up looking even more different than we think.
Yeah, and I think also, guys, when you make that decision, how are you going to go out and sort of spend your money in the portal as well, you also got to remember, if let's say you said, look, we're going to go out, let's find an RB1, let's just get that guy that's going to come in and be the dude, right? Well, if you're going to do that, it also has to work out where that guy truly comes in and lives up to that. And, if you, surprisingly, like if you look back at the rankings, and again, I think it would have been tough for any running back to get going. Like I think if this was an offensive line that was opening up a few more holes this past season, we may be saying a completely different thing about Rasul Faison, because Faison, when he had room to operate, when he got in space, we saw some flashes of a really good running back there. And you go back and look, though, Faison, and this is according to the entire recruiting industry, was the number 5 running back in the transfer portal when he came in. If you go back to the prior year, Rocket Sanders was the number 6 running back in the transfer portal. So both of them were actually, in terms of the rankings, very, very similar. Now, Rocket may have been slightly, I would say, his status may have been slightly hurt because he was coming off of an injury. You were kind of wondering, is he going to be able to get back to his former self and all those things. But when you look at the production there, I think there was a little bit more excitement, certainly here locally, about Rocket and what he was able to do than there was last cycle. But still, that there are no guarantees. Like, as much as you would like to think, we've got some data on what guys can do at the college level, that probably means that the transfer portal rankings are going to be incredibly accurate. That really has not proved to be the case, to be completely honest. I think the recruiting industry is still figuring out how to rank these guys, because there's so many of them, and they enter with such swiftness. Like, how do you even keep up with it, you know? And I think On3/Rivals has done a great job of trying to, what they've done is say, hey, we're going to start ranking college players, period. Not just portal players. Like, they have college rankings now. So if you have that baseline, you then use that rating to, when they enter the portal, okay, we already have a rating on this guy. Now we just use that rating to create the rankings. That's a great way to get a head start on it, but that still doesn't mean that it's just completely going to be accurate with all these guys you're recruiting. So the fact Christian Clark and Jabri Wallace-Coleman have not played a ton, to me, means, yes, there is an unknown there, but there also could be an upside there that we just don't know yet how good or not good, whichever way it could go, that they are yet.
Definitely going to be a room to keep an eye on throughout the offseason, and obviously as we get into playing games coming up in the fall, we'll take a look at the offensive line room coming up tomorrow, because that's obviously been the big story of this offseason so far. We'll come back and targeting in college football. Is it finally going to change this offseason? We'll discuss that next. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs here on the game.
The problem is no one knows what targeting is. We do have rules, and there are parameters and bullet points and indicators. Those are all written down. No one knows when they see it. Imagine we're going to eject kids from games, but we don't really know what we're ejecting them for. There's no consistency in the way it's applied. Even conference to conference, the thing's enforced differently.
All right, I guess Josh was done talking, but
at this point.
Yeah, welcome back in Gamecock Central Takeover Hour. I'm Wes, he is Chris, and guys, I think this is honestly pretty long overdue in that the targeting rule was put in place for a reason, and the reason that it was such a big impact foul in that you're saying, hey, if you do this, you're out of the game, and you, depending on when you were called for this, you may be out of the first half of the next game as well. It was the intent of, all right, we are going to 100% stop guys from leading with their helmet and launching themselves, and if we can take that out of the game, I believe was the intent. If we can take that out of the game, maybe the guys will naturally start to tackle in ways that do not put themselves in position for targeting. But I think in theory that makes sense. In the reality of it is that the game moves far too fast for some of these split-second decisions. Sometimes, you ever seen targeting get called and you're going, yep, that was probably targeting. Like, by the rule, that was correct. But you're going, what was the guy supposed to do?
Yeah.
And so I think it's always kind of been a natural progression, I think, for the targeting rule, just common sense-wise, and apparently they're going to have a discussion moving forward about, this according to Steve Shaw, National Coordinator of Officials, and the NCAA's Secretary Rules Editor. They told Yahoo Sports last week in Miami that basically Steve Shaw says this needs to be an annual discussion. And I agree with that. Let's have two different forms of this, and let's have the ability to even say, look, you're going to get the 15 yards, you're going to get the automatic first down, but we're not going to kick you out of this football game.
Yeah.
And I even think you can go the direction of, all right, if you have two that we'll call it minor targetings, if you have two of like the minor inadvertent targeting, if you have two of those in a game, then that's going to add up to one of the more major targeting calls. And now, all right, you're out of here. Like you
like
need to be
unsportsmanlike conduct.
Yeah, you need to be a little bit more careful, man. But like I think we've all kind of, it's one of those things, kind of like a catch as well, where we all kind of know what a catch looks like, but then defining it is a little bit more difficult. And, how many times do they have that rules expert or the announcers will, before a call is finalized, be like, I don't really think that's targeting. And then they'll be like, the targeting is confirmed, the player is ejected.
Yeah.
And so I also think there's a place to be made, because it is hard to judge intent as well. Okay, we're not really sure if this is targeting, but it's close enough that we're going to keep on the 15, but we're not going to eject you. I think when there's a little bit of just uncertainty about if it's truly targeting, that could play into this potential rules change as well.
Yeah, I do like the idea of having levels to it, because not all targetings are created equal. And what you said, I mean, we see that all the time. What was that guy supposed to do? I mean, that phrase has been uttered so many times by people in the stadium or watching on television, stream, whatever, and you see a guy is going down for a tackle, the offensive player ducks to, boom, there's a collision, and maybe even a bad collision, but you're sitting there going, I mean, these guys are running, 18 to 20 miles an hour at each other. What is that guy supposed to do? So I do like the idea of having levels, but there's something else in here, and this is just a symptom of, I think, officiating in general. I recognize it's a tough job, but how many calls, whether it's targeting or something else, do we go back and say, what is that guy looking at? What is the crew looking at? Because you see something that looks like obvious targeting, and regardless of whether or not there's any level to it, no targeting. Or, something that the reverse of that. So how can they fix it to where maybe the rule, they've made some adjustments to the rule to try to make it more clear, but you still have these issues, whether or not it's inadvertent, whether or not it's an egregious targeting. Sometimes you have calls that you look at it and go, man, it really looks like they missed that one. How do you fix that part of it? How do you fix the officiating in general? I think that's another part of this discussion. But I do like the idea of having levels to targeting.
And this is a little bit outside the scope of what we're talking about, but somewhat related. Do you remember the Saints-Panthers game this year, late in the game, where Tyler Shuck, there's less than 10 seconds. I think the Saints are out of timeouts. And they're going to have to throw this ball to the sideline. They're setting up for a big field goal at the end. And they run QB draw, and very clearly Tyler Shuck slides late, knowing that the defense is going to panic. Wait, QB draw? At no point in my mind, in my Rolodex of things that may be happening in this situation, at no point am I thinking quarterback draw. Oh, it's a quarterback draw. Then he gets down late, he gets hit, and the refs are automatically, quarterback got hit sliding, boom, 15, first down, deeper into field goal range. You can debate, all right, maybe that's a great call by the Saints. You certainly would say that was a call made to take advantage of a rule. So I think, and I know college football and the NFL have certain ways that these things are actually officiated, and it's a little bit separated, but I think one of the things sports in general most has an issue with right now, I think gambling is number one, and games being fixed or stuff like that, all the different stuff in terms of are you going to have this many points or not. That stuff is maybe the biggest issue athletics faces right now. But right behind it for me is just the fact that your average fan and then even your hardcore fan for targeting, personal foul on the quarterback, roughing the passer, NFL, what's a catch, college, what's a catch. Nobody has any idea what any of those things actually are.
Well, and I find it interesting, and by the way, related, college football not expected to make any more adjustments to the kickoff rule, right? The NFL made some adjustments. College football has no interest in that. No, has there been any more conversation about what is a catch? That's not mentioned in this piece, but there's been a lot of issues with that.
Yeah, we talked about it game one for South Carolina this year with Nick Harbor.
Yeah, you're going back and comparing. Well, it got ruled a catch in this game, different crew, different game, different setting, all that. But it comes up enough to where shouldn't that be addressed? Probably so.
Yeah, I actually thought the officials got it. Sorry, Jack, but I thought the officials got it right at the end of the Buffalo game. I thought there was not possession yet, and that it was an interception. I thought they got that one right, but just the fact that you have so many conspiracy theories that are being created off of that. You have that in college ball as well, though, just with the SEC is going to protect their big names. You know what I'm saying?
Well, and the other thing about the SEC, can we get more transparency with having the officials mic'd up, during reviews? I would love to see that next year.
Yeah, especially since the SEC likes to say how they are cutting edge. They are the leaders in college football. They are the ones doing things first and the greatest and all these things. Yet you let the ACC get the head start, and then you're seeing other conferences say, "Hey, it's a pretty good idea," and implement it. The SEC has decided at this point not to, which I think is a great point, man. Plus, you can always throw a sponsor on the board behind the little video where you're going in there and make it a.
What if the ref starts reading it?
I mean, you literally can make
this
this
review brought to you by Firehouse Subs.
a revenue building
says,
situation. So, all right, guys, we're going to close it out on the other side with a little bit of Gamecock football recruiting. We'll be right back. All right, guys, welcome back in. Closing it out. Gamecock Central take over our. I'm Wes. He is Chris. And, man, so the recruiting calendar, Chris, they say never sleeps, never stops. And portal pretty much locked in, pretty much. There could be additions at some point to the roster here or there, but for the most part, the bulk of that recruiting is over with. And, I kind of took a little bit of a deep breath when that was over, and then you're going, all right, what is next in this college football landscape calendar? And for those who haven't been following it too closely, what has kind of become the next step for coaches right now is they are on the road right now seeing high school recruits who are technically your juniors in school right now, but are going to be your seniors next year. So this hurts to say, class of 2027 prospects, just go ahead, 2027 and 2028. Chris, this is a couple of days old, but Captain Munnerlyn Jr.
I'm in denial.
Yes, Captain Munnerlyn Jr., son of Gamecock great Captain Munnerlyn, picks up an offer from South Carolina earlier this week. He is class of 2029, which is even harder to think about. But, yes, if that makes you feel old, you are. And pretty cool moment, though, for Cap's son to get an offer. I very specifically remember that whole era here where recruiting, I feel like, was starting to go a little bit mainstream. You had the Gary Gray recruitment, a cycle or two later after Captain, a very just not highly recruited guy, but comes in, plays from day one, and then was in the NFL kind of as that nickelback role for forever. And just very, very cool, though, moment there, I'm sure, for the Munnerlyn family.
Captain Munnerlyn, class of 2006. So early. Before, I don't think you were doing it full-time yet either, right?
No, I was just kind of following
Yeah,
it.
I was following, but I remember following his recruitment. He was one of those classic Ron Cooper,
DB's coach here at the time.
DB's coach here at the time. He was one of those guys that could actually do a podcast or an interview. I made the NFL. I was a 2-star. A lot of guys say that, and you're like, I'm looking at the Rivals rankings. You were the number 60 prospect in the country, or something like that. Cap was actually a 2-star,
A good old, a true, man, they did Cap wrong.
Just a true.
He was a 5.4, which on the old school rival scale.
Yeah.
You should not be playing in the SEC.
Yeah. Beat Kansas State and West Virginia on him. Get him really good special teams player, really good defensive back here. Then, like you said, makes the NFL for years. Coaching now, and now has a son. So, yeah, 23 recruiting cycles later, Captain Munnerlyn Jr. coming along.
It's neither here nor there, but somebody could do a great story on the deletion of the 2-star. There are no 2-stars anymore.
Nope.
When was the last time you heard of a Power 4 school landing a 2-star?
It doesn't happen.
They're literally, if you go back, they're low 3, and it's just a dude. I think it's a matter of social media. Nobody wants, none of the recruiting folks want to have to hear about, oh, you made my son a 2-star.
Yeah, you imagine the graphics that Rivals puts out a graphic, so and so commits 2-star. Because the thing is, if you went back and looked at the old 2-star rating scale, I still remember what the Rivals, 5.2 to 5.4 2-star, 5.5 to 5.7 3-star, and so on. If you were a 2-star, it said on the thing that you've got NFL potential, right? So that's the thing. It was this big, you made me and nowadays it's a 3-star. I'm a 3-star. That's disrespectful. It's that's literally saying you may play in the NFL, So it's not that much, but it is, to your point. Nobody wants to be a 2-star.
Yeah, the thing I was going to get into is that prospects are setting official visits now for late spring and early summer. I don't think we have time to give that the credit it needs, so we'll probably do that later on this week, or maybe dive into it on the podcast. But, Chris, I think also worth mentioning, like, the final rankings now are coming out for rivals yesterday. Julian Walker, local kid, South Carolina flips him the day after signing day from Michigan. Number 15 overall prospect in his class, number 4 edge, and at least in the rivals rankings, will finish the cycle as a 5-star and as South Carolina's highest ranked recruit. Chris, I got 2 that I saw, 2 reactions saying that was not high enough.
Whew. Okay. That's quite a bar.
There's like 25,000 high school players that play football.
That's saying you're going to be a first-round pick.
Yes. So.
No diss.
That's not a diss. It's not a diss. If you're the number 15 player in the country, confirmed, not a diss. All right, we're out of here. We're going to turn over the mic. He is Chris. I am Wes. We'll be back tomorrow for the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour at 11.